the Around the NFL podcast. Puts the papa in papaya.
From the Chris Wessling Podcast Studio, it's Around the NFL. I am Dan Hanzus. I got heroes here. Gregg Rosenthal, Marc Sessler. Busy. Cowboys camp on Monday. Check out that one. The Hard Knocks podcast debuted with episode 1 recap Tuesday. And shout out to Eric Roberts behind the glass, who's been grinding his hiney off all week for us and doing elite production work. We did that with Connie and special guest Rich Eisen. Check that out if you haven't yet. And now we have 2 more new episodes of ATN today and Thursday. Football, Mark, is back.
I want to, if there are people out there that maybe aren't Hard Knocks aficionados and watchers, and I go hot and cold on that show. I just want to say, listen to this episode that you and Rich and Colleen did, because, bud. I mean, well, we know you're a Jets fan, and Rich is too, but, like, you kind of designed in a really wonderful way how you became one, what this first episode meant, and yet it wasn't, if you aren't a Jets fan, it wasn't laborious. It was very well done, and, like, I can only imagine the cloud that you're floating on, seeing this whole Jets team and what they are.
I don't want to be that guy, but I think it is important sometimes to understand, like, how lucky we are, like, getting paid to watch the Jets Hard Knock show and then talk about it with my friends. It's pretty awesome and really excited.
And Rich, like, it would have blown your mind. I listened to half of it. I listened to the Rich part so far. Usually I would be listening on the way in, but we had a very important call with our great friend.
We did.
Henry Hodgson.
Handsome Hank.
So that cut into my time.
A planning call. We'll leave it at that.
Looking as handsome as
ever, fantastic.
by the way.
It was fantastic.
We'll do a little Hard Knocks talk a little bit later, but we got a lot going on today because we have one of the smartest football men in the business, Aaron Shatz, over at FTN. He released his annual football almanac 2023, and obviously if you don't read this almanac, you're not really prepared for the season. So we're going to dig in on the defensive side of the ball, which we haven't really tackled.
That's why this is a
wordplay.
Nailed it. We're going to work that side of the ball, that conversation with Aaron, and what defenses stand out to him and what defenses might be ready for regression or to be outright terrible. Get into all that. But first, let's do some news.
Just understand this. I don't give a what goes down this year. We will always be in games, no matter what. We break some shoelaces and get a few points on us. Guys, we're going to be in every game. Guys, this is across the field on the back shoulder. Look at this. I don't know if there's any other human on earth that can make that throw. He's our quarterback. He's ours. He's ours. Awesome, man.
I think that should be a drop going forward, Eric Roberts. Yes, as I said to Rich Eisen, Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator for the Jets, Jeff Ulbrich, he speaks for all of us as Jets fans. It's like, he's ours, watching that episode. And, that was in the defensive room where the coordinator's going over some plays from practice. We'll get some thoughts out there. Anybody wants to hear my thoughts, obviously go check out the podcast with Connie and I. But episode 1 thoughts, Mark, we'll start with you.
Ulbrich, to me, was one of the stars of the episode because, you would think it's just Saleh calling the plays on defense and, like, what does the coordinator do? I mean, I love his fire, and I think that there's something to him and what the Jets are. There's a lot of connective tissue there. And, I mean, I think this episode, maybe if it lacked 4 or 5 like deep narrative threads like some Hard Knocks ones do, and this show us a chance to get into that, it was really about the experience of Aaron Rodgers. And I think for those that have been critical of Aaron Rodgers, I'm certainly one of those in the past, like, this is a different version of this human being, and like you just get this feeling that he couldn't be happier being there, and you hear all the giggles and the anticipation when they're watching him whip that pass in that film session there with Ulbrich, and it's like this team, and there's so many young players, but teammates, coaches, it's like they have watched Jesus land. That is sort of the aura I got watching this first episode, and it's kind of incredible because it reminds me of nothing the New York Jets have ever produced on a human level.
Right. It was like the Hard Knocks version of Barbie. It was just like feel good, easy entertainment, but it was also like a little different than Hard Knocks usually is. Like they decided to, I think maybe mix it up. It was really all about Aaron Rodgers and the good vibes and everything. And it's cool to go along on the journey with these teams. And it helps that the team is the center or one of the center pieces of the NFL right now. It just does to be along the ride. It was great to be along the ride with the Lions too, and I think that's why we enjoyed part of that season with them. We'll see. It'll change over the next 3 or 4 weeks, but I really enjoyed it, and I loved the weed celebration that Sauce and Rodgers had going on, and that they just subtly alluded to it. They were like, expectations are higher in New York.
Well, that's Liev Schreiber,
Of course, Greg would like that.
who arrives in a helicopter.
And he's great in it. I love Liev Schreiber. I mean, we all loved him, but like,
It's fun.
There's like, Colleen mentioned it, like, there's this humility to him, and like, he was like sort of a kid in a candy store. Yet a bunch of those players are too young to really understand his career as an actor, and like Saleh didn't even know he was the narrator of the show.
Yeah, we were talking about, Connie and I were talking about,
I bet, yeah.
put yourself in his shoes there. The production team sends you to the practice in a helicopter, literally landing next to the field, and everyone's expecting, some huge celebrity to get out, and obviously Schreiber's a celebrity, but that was a funny little positioning of that. And one other thought on Ulbrich, because I already have regrets. We do our MVP rankings at the end of each episode. I should have given him a place in that conversation for just his takedown of the "do your job" complex.
That was good.
He actually
that
said
actually is gonna get on Belichick's radar.
He actually said, "F that." He said, "You got to do your job. What else are you gonna do?"
That's the next level.
It was time for somebody to take down "do your job," which is the most tired cliche to post on walls and complexes. And Ulbrich did it. I will address
There's
that
too many things on the walls with the Jets, though. They've got like 14
That's a
different
thing, though.
slogans. I know, but
all these places do that.
Yeah.
What is their main one? I forget what it was.
All gas, no break.
I know, but it's like AG, no NB.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
I don't
just like
I don't know.
just
There
wanna
was a
fly
lot of
around like a butterfly.
abbreviations.
yeah, it's too much.
What was that, Nate Hackett?
I just want to fly around like a butterfly.
Okay.
If Zach Wilson never pans
Cutie
out,
pie.
I will remember him eating Uncrustable after a preseason performance.
That was that. I thought his part of the show was a little uncomfortable.
No, I think it was good. It was interesting. I liked it.
I don't. I think
It
he's
wasn't
in a weird,
comfortable,
he's in a
but
weird place.
In a very tough position. Very tough position, especially if you're aging backwards and defying, humankind. He's now 16 years old.
I was thinking this is the one quarterback that literally looks like a boy.
I was thinking it would be tough for Packers fans to watch this, though. It's very much like watching the guy that your favorite player, your best player for the last 15 years just be totally reborn.
Oh, it's
like it wouldn't be a fun
Your
watch.
ex-wife,
Yeah,
that you have 4 kids with, and you were in love with, and over time it just broke down, and then
Well,
your
and
ex
one that,
found
like,
love,
What happened at the time of her life?
and it's on TV.
Yeah.
And that wasn't acting right. Like that was like on this very podcast 5 months ago, we're talking about how he's not acting right, how he was basically an inconsistent human, that he was being a jerk. And then you see him and suddenly he's in better shape. He's cracking jokes. He's happy. He's like a whole new guy. And you're like,
The Packers aren't innocent in all of that.
All
Whatever
right.
they say about Aaron Rodgers on TV is a lie.
Let's get into, and yes, check out the Hard Knocks podcast, and we'll have that up every Tuesday night on wherever you get your podcasts, and on this feed, this ATN feed. So it's pretty easy for you people to check out if you want. You people, let's get to it. Ron Rivera, head coach of the Commanders, created a bit of a mess for himself this week. Eric Bieniemy is the new offensive coordinator. We know Bieniemy's history with the Chiefs and his long struggle to try to get a head coaching job. It never happened. So now he's off on his own, attempting to build a bridge to that head coaching job. So this is a very important year and era for Bieniemy as a head coach. Rivera said some players are, quote, concerned with Bieniemy's intensity in training camp, which led to a big story, both for and against Bieniemy, mostly for Bieniemy and against Ron Rivera, putting that out there. The Commanders coach then followed up by offering a lengthy opening statement to his press conference on Wednesday, noting that his comments, quote, took on a different life. Don't do that thing. Don't do the thing where you blame the media for blowing up the story, because you said it, and you should know, Ron Rivera, how this world works. But anyway, it took on a different life than he intended, and that he wasn't as straightforward as he needed to be. Here's what else he said.
We talked about it, and and it was just, I basically told him, I put my foot in my mouth. I think what I said wasn't as clear as it needed to be. And I think the understanding of it is just the fact that I think everybody's making, in my opinion, a little bit more than needs to be made of this. Because, again, the results are what you're looking for on the field. And so far, the last couple of days have been outstanding. I think Eric has done a great job of communicating his message. Now that guys, have opened up, talked with him. He's opened up
his
to
ankle
them.
backpedaling.
It's been a great bit of growth the last couple of days that guys are starting to have the aha moments. That's why we do this. That's why we want that. It's we had
Greg's
a guy
waving
come out
at
of a
Eric,
break
trying to
one
shut
time
him up.
I'm just like, what's going on?
Just really burst out of it, and the ball was right on time. And you sit there and go,
Yeah, that's enough.
All right,
what we're
curtains to
talking
that.
about. That's what
Get
we're
the
looking
cane
for.
out.
Too long,
The
though.
long cane. Get it.
I wanted to
he's-
slam on the desk at the end. He gets real hyped
Oh,
up
was
there? At
there?
the end,
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I mean, but that's what I think how Ron Rivera gets into trouble is he's just like a free and easy, like long answers to every question talker. And he's absolutely right. It was way too much was made about it. I think people that read the quotes and tried to make it more than it was didn't listen to how he said it and in context. Because he was just kind of saying how, like, hey, look, players these days, like, they're not used to coaches that coach them hard, essentially. And that a couple of them had come up to him and said, hey, can you go talk to him? But he was saying it sort of in a joking way. And Bieniemy has this reputation as a coach that he's always a little hard edge, and people are just like, oh, okay. And because not every coach is like that anymore, that they're very sensitive to the players. But he also was saying, even as he was saying that, the players coming up to him, he was talking it down and saying, like, a lot of these young players, they got to get used to it. I think Bieniemy's response was as telling as anything, though. He said, yes, I am intense. Eric Bieniemy is who he is. Eric Bieniemy knows how to adapt and adjust. Eric Bieniemy is a tough, hard-nosed coach. That's 3 third persons in 3 sentences. But he also says, they got to understand, I'm their biggest critic. I'm also their number 1 fan. Any of his former players know I've got their back more than anyone. I'm going to support.
This was blown out of proportion. It's dust in the wind, hours from now. But I don't think that Ron Rivera, who if I had to pick a coach to like step in it in this way, I would not have put Ron Rivera in my top 20. I really
He's done
wouldn't
it
have.
a lot, I feel like, over the last
Not like that.
few
This
years.
to me is like this. I mean, I think he didn't think it would turn into all this, but my problem is when he does the backpedaling where the ankle breaks, Dan. He had a written statement. You're Ron Rivera. You've been doing this for a long, long time. Go out there and defend your coach.
That's how you know. That's how you know he really had regrets about how it played out and how it was dissected in the media.
Yeah, but you
I
don't do
wonder
a
if it
written
upset
statement
Yeah.
unless you're like in legal trouble. This is like something. Just go back your guy.
He's just
and
trying to put out a fire.
Right. And I have no problem with so Ben Stanek of The Athletic had I thought a good line. He said, there is intense and there is mean. Bieniemy's coaching style is firmly in the former category. I have no problem with this coaching style. I mean, I'm not a player, but I think the problem is that training camp largely sucks. I think you're going to find them to be complaining about something at some point to someone, and it's been a major shift. And I think a lot of the reports, though, coming out of Washington training camp is that your quarterback, Sam Howell, and Jacoby Brissett have not been thriving. Like, there have been a lot of up and down, which is not surprising, but I think one of the more intriguing preseason starts is Howell versus the Browns on Friday night.
And they said they've gotten better, and Rivera alluded to that over the last handful of days. And it's interesting because he's a former running backs coach, and we saw it even at Cowboys practice. Like, running backs coaches are different. They're always the ones barking like crazy. And Bieniemy has this reputation, which is interesting because when you watch quarterback, he never said a word.
No.
But he's always had this reputation as a particularly hard-nosed guy barking on you. And that to me is very running back and very running backs coach-ish. But now he's the offensive coordinator running the whole time.
And it's in some ways a loaded subject, so I don't want to take it too far in terms of what I saw in quarterback. But it was interesting how Mahomes, 95% of his conversations in game in the heat of the battle throughout the season and the playoffs was either with Andy Reid or with Matt Nagy. It just was interesting to me. So I'm really, I like everyone else, you want to see what Bieniemy does with this great opportunity he has. Well, we shall see. In other news, Minnesota Vikings owner Mark Wilf declined to say Tuesday whether he wants Kirk Cousins to re-sign with the franchise when his contract expires after the conclusion of this season, putting that decision on GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and coach Kevin O'Connell. Here's Wilf's quote: "We'll leave that to Kwesi and coach to work through those discussions. There's always conversations on that, but our real focus is 100% on 2023 and getting where we need to be and where I know we can be." Mark, my thoughts on this is this is cool. It's going to work out, I think, how it should. I think Cousins is going to have another productive, solid season. I think it's going to put him in a position to get paid, and he's going to get paid again. He's going to sign another big deal, 2-3 year deal with whether it's the Vikings or someone else. And it makes sense for the Vikings at this point, assessing a relationship that's lasted since 2018. Where are we? Where do we want to go going forward? Let's use this year as a real trial.
Yeah, there's no consternation here. Cousins said back in June that he didn't even have any faint expectations that they'd even talk contract till next March, and he knows that. And I think, I know you guys watched the whole quarterback thing, but from what little I know, I watched little snippets here and there. But I mean, Kirk Cousins came out as the big winner of that whole thing, as the nicest man on, east of the Mississippi, I guess, if he is east or he's north.
What's happening?
Somewhere in there. I don't know.
I mean,
keep going.
He's east and north, yes.
But to me, it's just like, I think everything they've
he's
done.
not north, I guess, because it is.
I mean, it's
it's a north-south tributary.
It's not a sharp east or
What's
west.
going on out here west of the Mississippi? Just way nicer guys than Kirk Cousins. I'd feel like he would have that on lockdown.
Well, he's west of the Mississippi.
Give him the whole country.
Then I'll give him the west if he's west.
He's west of the.
Mark said east.
Oh.
Well, and east, so I'm giving him the whole thing.
I apologize.
Let's give him the whole nation.
The whole
The
thing.
continental.
He's west.
Not Hawaii or Alaska. Let's keep that out of the conversation.
Let's calm down with the east and west of the Mississippi too, kind of
Little
being
bit.
the defining
2023.
aspect of this country.
What are we on
Well,
wagons
it used
still?
to be, Greg.
Absolutely,
Right.
but
Outside of me just
commerce-
referencing it, how often is it getting referenced?
Guys, we've got Aaron Shatz in 6 minutes.
gets a lot of
Okay.
pop. Gets a lot of pops.
Go ahead.
The ships.
No, I think Vikings have said all offseason, we're redoing the books, we're cutting money, and a lot of change could be coming.
You know how old Kirk Cousins got to be before the start of that next contract?
Let me guess. Hang on. He's going to be like 35.
He'll be 36 by the start of next season. It's like I got my top 50 free agents of 2024 coming out this week, Dan.
Plug it.
Not sure where to put Kirk. I think I had him at around 10 or 11, but it's like that is getting up there where, to me, ideally, you would have him on a year-to-year type of deal. And he'll get more than that, I think, from another team somewhere if the Vikings don't want to give him more than year-to-year.
Speaking of Vikings and quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater, once upon a time a first-round pick of the Vikings. He's bounced around a lot, obviously, and despite that, has always kept Gregg Rosenthal's attention as his new project, perhaps his new version of Geno Smith, now that he needs a QB to get behind that
I'm
sees
still with
overlooked.
I'm with them both.
Geno's eyes are wandering, Now that he's like one of those men who, he's with the wife, and then he hits it big, and then all of a sudden the eyes start darting around. That's Geno.
You think that's Geno's attitude? He seems to be
It's
quite plugged
Greg,
in.
thank you for all the sport, during when I was kind of down. But now I have a lot of options. I have a feast in front of me.
I think he's barely
looking
aware
I don't
of my existence as a human. He does follow me on Twitter, and I don't think that's changed. I think that's been
Greg trying to be
consistent.
humble there,
consistent.
but we're
Well,
picking up
that's
on
tough,
a
Greg.
little
Well, that's why
brag.
I'm
Tough,
saying.
Greg.
That's why I'm saying barely. Because if you get the likes here and there, I can at least throw in the barely. Teddy Bridgewater, I'm pretty sure, is unaware of my existence, but I am happy he's a Lion.
I mean, I would say this, and it happened again at the Cowboys camp. A lot of people know Greg. Greg's been in the business for a long time. You've done your job at a high level. We're very lucky to have you on the team here at Around the NFL. So I would not be surprised if Geno Smith recognized you. No, I would not be surprised.
Greg also
gotta meet
pointed
him
out that
sometime.
Jerry Jones recognized him when he walked by, and basically vaguely.
That was me, though.
That was Dan.
Oh well, then what are we
You
doing?
recognized
Like, what am I? I mean,
I
this
saw it in his
entire
eyes.
show is filled with people like this. So.
If Teddy ever was going to become the next Geno, he's in the right place. Now, I don't want Jared Goff to get hurt because that's what it would take. Teddy is better than Nate Sudfeld. I assume he's going to win that job. Do I think Teddy would be any worse than Jared Goff if he took over? I do not.
Still.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
this.
Jared Goff was quietly
We're still doing
the
this.
best version.
We're
of
still
himself
taking
last
down
year.
Jared Goff, really, for
I'm
no reason.
not-
Just trying to
I'm
have a
saying-
solid career.
In this great situation that is the Detroit Lions, Teddy Bridgewater would put up excellent numbers and be an above average.
All these years,
if he can stay healthy.
I feel like all these years of bouncing around for Teddy now, he's had opportunities to kind of find his place, find his footing. The fact that it still hasn't happened, I think it tells you something. Not that he's a bad quarterback, and certainly a likable guy and a great comeback story after what happened with his knee injury.
Which was 7 years ago at this point.
It's crazy.
I mean, it tells you, yeah, he's hurt too much to be relied upon. But but I still remember that Denver season. It was a nice little job I did.
All right, couple more things. That tragic story, Henry Ruggs, former first-round pick of the Raiders, who got drunk at a bar or a club and then went driving home in Vegas a couple of years back, rear-ended at a crazy speed a poor woman and her dog, and they both burned to death in the car, and he was way over the legal limit. Just a terrible story all the way around. And Ruggs, 24 years old now, he's been out of the league after the Raiders cut him shortly after that incident in November of 2021. On Wednesday, Clark County District Court Judge Jennifer Schwartz told Ruggs that it was one of the more tragic cases she had seen in her sentencing of Ruggs to 3 to 10 years in that fatal DUI. Ruggs said to the parents and family of Miss Tinter, that's the woman who died in the accident, Tina Tinter, I sincerely apologize for the pain and suffering. I don't really know what else needs to be said on that one, boys, but just like one of the sadder stories. Let's finish up with a little 8 o'clock delight.
The Texans lose newly signed tackle. We missed that one a few weeks ago. Titus Howard got a big deal. Good tackle combo in Houston, but they're not going to be around, Mark. He's out for 6
Nope,
weeks.
they got Laramie Tunsil. You do have George Font. Maybe he can help out.
Rams brought back John
Is
Johnson.
it Liev Schreiber or Liev Schreiber?
I say leave.
I've got to get that right.
But I am hearing people say Liev now, and I don't like that at all.
What is it, Eric? Can you check
I've
into
been
that?
hearing more of Liev, too.
I feel like in Russia, it would definitely be Liev.
I'm self-conscious when I say it every time.
I've been saying leave my entire life. I'm not
Okay,
changing.
go ahead.
The Rams signed John Johnson. What do
Johnny
you know
Johnson.
John Johnson most for?
Safety, Browns, Rams. Rams
Also,
again.
came
And
on our show.
Came on our show when we thought we were getting Robert
Right,
Woods
But
at the old Coliseum, and we were like, Hamana, Hamana, Hamana.
But we
Who
told
is this?
in your ear, like seconds before he sat down, it was like, this is John Johnson of the Rams safety.
Yes.
It was a rookie at the time.
Very close to the old Zeuser saying, well, Robert Woods, great to have you on the show. That would have went well.
No.
Kareem Hunt visited the Colts after a trip to the Saints. Jadeveon Clowney visited the Ravens. Baker Mayfield
Wrap it up.
and Kyle Trask will each start a preseason game. They'll
This
take
could
some
bubble
turns.
into the worst quarterback situation.
They are co-number one QBs on the depth chart. Can we calm down a little bit over there in Tampa?
That's not fun. Broncos lost another starter. Mike McGlinchey's out 2 to 3 weeks, and then Rashad Bateman off the PUP list for the Ravens. It sounds like J.K. Dobbins is probably going to end his hold-in fairly soon, even though no one has called it a hold-in.
All right, and I'll tag that with Jonathan Taylor has left the scene in Indy to rehab his.
He's gone inside. I actually think this is something where the journalism industry had an impact because the Colts beat writers were like, can we get Jonathan Taylor off the field scowling at every practice? It's just sort of bad vibes. And then like a day or two later, they're like, he's just inside rehabbing. It's like, if he's just going to be standing there, it's kind of awkward.
That's what's happening in the news. Promo time. Football is back. And NFL Network has every preseason game, including 23 of them live. 23 and 23, Greggy. Big names putting new cities on their backs. A new class putting their names on the map. Your team is back in action. It's time for football. The NFL preseason, August 10th through the 26th on NFL Network and stream on NFL Plus. We'll be right back with Aaron Shatz.
Wow.
I asked Eric to send me something a little fresh.
Eric is from a different generation than us, and he found something that I don't think we would have found.
This sounds like something that was playing out of the boombox when Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes were dribbling poorly in White Men Can't Jump.
Has a bit of a CNC Music Factory vibe to it.
Here's a man that has a CNC Music Factory vibe to him. No, that doesn't make sense. He is a great man. He is one of the preeminent football minds. He's the Oppenheimer of, detailed, nuanced takes on football, founder of Football Outsiders, and now he's got his new partnership with FTN as Football Almanac 2023. Aaron Shatz, welcome back to Around the NFL.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. I think I'm more Oppenheimer than I am CNC Music Factory. Yeah.
You were a DJ though. I do remember that. You were
alternative rock, man.
a professional
we never would have
DJ.
played CNC Music
No,
Factory on my station.
You were looking
No,
down
more
on
like Soul
CNC.
Asylum.
Yeah, there you go.
That's in that Nathaniel Hackett, dance instructor category right there. That you were a DJ. I'm impressed. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, it was my first job out of college.
My buddy Bob and I saw Soul Asylum at the Troubadour like 5 years ago. How about that?
Yeah, they're still going.
Still doing it. Still doing the thing.
A lot of bands still going. Not all the original members, but still going.
Got Perner in there.
Some of the souls went back to where they.
Winona Ryder, not in attendance, but I did look around. Aaron Shatz, again, this is it. And this is the guy. This is the almanac that you need to study ahead of a football season. And we're lucky enough to have him here. And Aaron, we wanted to really kind of dive into the defensive side of the ball in our conversation with you. Because there were some things when you kind of look at your breakdowns on the DVOA side of things that really stood out, Greg. I mean, why don't you get us going with this conversation? What's a rating that Schatz and his team had that really jumped out to?
Yeah, I was fascinated. First, let's go through like what your top 5 were, because it's interesting. On defense, in terms of DVOA projections, it was Bills, Jets, Cowboys, Niners, and then Commanders. The Bills being on top kind of gets to something I've been noticing lately, that there's this feeling that it's like, well, has their window closed, or like, is the rest of the league caught up and past the Bills? And I do feel like I'm taking crazy pills a little, because they won 13 games a year ago, and they've had as stable a defense as anyone. So why do you think Bills and Jets especially came out on top when you're looking at it? Because I saw also you have the Bills as your Super Bowl pick, which is weird that that's going to be, I feel like, not a trendy pick this year. The Bills getting to the Super Bowl finally.
Yeah, the thing about the Bills, one of the things about the Bills, and this also goes for the Cowboys, is that people overestimate in their minds the effect of one playoff game instead of thinking about the much larger sample size of the entire regular season. And so, yeah, the Bills, the last time we remember the Bills, they were not playing well. That was a loss, no question about it. But they had a phenomenal regular season. They've had a couple of phenomenal regular seasons. Their defense has been really good, and they've added a bunch of stuff to their defense, right? Like by getting guys back from injury and adding Leonard Floyd, like their defense should be better. They have a whole year of Tre'Davious White. They get Micah Hyde back. There's just a lot of reason to believe that their defense can be even better this year than it was last year.
I looked at this list, and right away I have a very clear number one thing that jumped out to me. I'll say before I jump into that, though, that this almanac that you guys put out every year, like the writing, I'll go read this in like taverns and restaurants, and like I'll be cracking up at some of the stuff that's going on here. So I know that back in the day, the farmers, they wrote an almanac, a lot of data, not good writing, not intriguing. This is a different type of almanac. Pick it up. But you had the Falcons as the 10th defense. And I know they did a lot this offseason, so you're weighing some of that. But I'd branch that off to say that when you go through your projected win totals, you have the Falcons as the 3rd highest team in the NFC at 10.1, above Philadelphia and just below San Francisco and Dallas. I mean, Greg and I have been on this Falcons thing. Dan is now there too. I think they're going to be so fun to watch. But what brought you to this place? What is the core of your belief? Because this was the thing that stood out to me more than anything else.
Defense and schedule. So we think their defense is going to really improve. There's a variable in our system based on a combination of, free agent additions, getting guys back from injury, and drafting rookies high. Buffalo is actually number 1 in that variable because of all the guys they're getting back from injury. But Atlanta is number 2. Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell and Caden Ellis, and they've just added a ton on defense. And then their schedule is remarkably easy. I know it sounds strange given that the NFC South was won by a team with a losing record last year, but the Saints and Falcons schedules are so much easier than the other 30 teams that it is really likely that you're going to have 2 NFC South teams in the playoffs over teams that are better than them. But have harder schedules. Because if you look at the overall DVOA projections, the Saints and Falcons are projected to be average. Like not good, just average. But the schedule is so easy. The hardest quarterback that either of those teams plays is Trevor Lawrence.
Wow.
And then the Falcons also have Aaron Rodgers, which the Saints don't have because they play the Patriots instead of the Jets. And as far as top quarterbacks in the league, that's it. Then I think the next hardest one they play is Kirk Cousins. Like they just have really easy schedules.
I don't like this because I was already toying around with putting them both in the playoffs, like in my mind. But now I feel like Schatz took a little bit of my that's kind of a good sandwich prop thunder here. Not happy with that. But you do have them as top 10 defenses, both of them. So even separate to the schedule, that would be amazing because the Falcons had one of the worst defenses in the league a year ago.
Now I'm curious, not to get off topic, but who's like kind of the inverse of that? A team that all your data really backs up as being a good team, but the schedule is so brutal that it's going to depress their value and hold them back.
Maybe the Chargers, the Jets.
Oh, the
whole
Jets
AFC
schedule is
East.
brutal.
Yeah.
Miami.
The whole AFC East, the 4 hardest schedules in the league are the 4 AFC East teams.
Miami, you have 8.5 wins projected. Patriots are 8. And I was a little surprised that neither of those teams were in your top 10 defensive projections because that's not taking into account schedule. That's looking at how effective they're going to be. When I came up, I tried to come up with what my 5 were before I looked at yours, just curious how they'd be different. And I had Cowboys, 49ers, Bills, Patriots, Dolphins. I had all 3 of the AFC East teams in my top 5, and you don't have the Dolphins or the Patriots particularly close. You have the Jets and the Bills at a whole nother level to them.
Yeah, the Patriots, the Dolphins are interesting because the Dolphins didn't have a lot of takeaways last year, so there's reason to believe that they're going to be better. But, obviously no more credit for Jalen Ramsey, right? So
Sure.
I think the thing about the Dolphins, some of this has to do with splits of stats and certain down and play situations that's sort of complicated to get to. But for the Dolphins, I think part of it is that mentally everyone wants to feel like Vic Fangio comes in and builds a top 5 defense.
Yes.
And historically, Vic Fangio does not come in and immediately build a top 5 defense. Most of the teams he's been with have taken some time to have their defenses develop into being top defenses. So I don't think that Fangio necessarily equals a top 5 defense on his own. And then a lot of this is just general regression from both of these teams. Like they were good on 3rd and short last year, and that tends to regress a little bit. And, in general, an important analytic precept is defense is harder to project than offense. So, the defensive projections are just not going to be as accurate as the offensive ones. And a lot of the teams are sort of grouped around the middle because we don't quite know what's going to happen with defenses.
I think, if you ask the average fan what the triumvirate of power is in the AFC, it's very clearly Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati to most people. I don't know if you're going to be having a delightful trip to Cincinnati anytime soon. This got on Greg and my radar as well, that you have the Browns overall as number 1, the 9th best defense, and the Bengals down at 26. That threw me. But then also Cleveland as the 3rd best team in the AFC with a 10.5 win total, and Cincinnati at 10.2. I mean, I know you're not doing this for clicks and tweets and stuff, but this is going to get on some people's radar, I would imagine.
Yeah, notice that Cincinnati is better, but has a harder schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
Cincinnati does come out slightly better. But yeah, the fact that we have Cleveland so high is going to surprise people. Defensively, we like what they've done with the additions this offseason. People like Zadarius Smith, think their defense is going to really improve. Offensively, it's about sample size. You have 3 years of them having good offenses with bad quarterbacks, and then you have 6 bad games at the end of last year. And you have all of Deshaun Watson's career of him being good, and then 6 bad games at the end of last year. So what means more? All of that sample of Kevin Stefanski running a good offense and Deshaun Watson running a good offense, or those 6 games? I mean, we're going to bet that it's the larger sample that tells you more about how good Cleveland is. And then we have Cincinnati. They lost a lot of talent in their secondary. So we do have them declining a little bit on defense. And that's what puts Cleveland slightly ahead of them in wins, although it's not like Cincinnati's not a major Super Bowl contender. They have our number 2 projection on offense.
That's surprising. But you have them as like one of the 5 teams that have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense.
Cleveland, yeah, we have Cleveland right on the edge of the top 10 in both offense.
Is that because Jim Schwartz used to blurb your
no
Football Outsiders Almanac back in like 2005? That was a good pop for you though early on, that you got a real big football guy. It would always be like Bill Simmons, maybe Peter King, I feel like, but it would always be Schwartz. It would always be Jim Schwartz's quote on the front of the book that would be like, these guys really know what they're talking about.
You know what Greg is going for here. Greg wants a blurb at some point in the near future.
Oh, we'll take it. Oh, I'll take it happily. We counted him as a new defensive coordinator the way we normally do with new defensive coordinators. It is a new scheme they're learning, and all other things being equal, teams take a little bit of a step back when they have to learn a new scheme. But of course, all things aren't equal because of the talent that they added in the offseason and, other statistical trends.
Seahawks, you had it 7th on defense. You wrote to me, you put your top 12 in an order very nicely for me, and you thought that was the biggest surprise of your top 10.
Yeah, again, this is another one where they added talent. They're the number 3 in the added talent variable because they drafted the cornerback so high and then getting Bobby Wagner back and then getting Dre'Mont Jones.
Sneaky good offseason, you're right.
The defensive projection that if you ask me subjectively, I think we're too low on the Seattle offense and too high on the Seattle defense, and probably right about them overall.
I get what you're doing with Minnesota's defense. They are dead last at 32. I do think Brian Flores could give them a little bit of a boost, but personnel-wise, it's a bit of an apocalypse. But overall, I mean, I kind of love what you did with the Vikings, because this will be another minor earthquake up in that part of the country. You have them at 6.4 wins. So you're basically saying what happened last year was ultimately a massive mirage in terms of yes.
They were 27th in DVOA overall, despite being 13-4. It was like the weirdest season of all time. So like all advanced stats said the Vikings were overrated, but we may have had them lower than anybody. And then they went out and lost talent, right? No more Thielen, no more Zadarius Smith, no more Patrick Peterson. So, Dalvin Cook also.
Kendrick.
So, I mean, I just don't think Minnesota is going to be very good. And I don't think they think they're going to be that good, because I think that Adolfo Mensa ran the offseason as if they're rebuilding.
Right.
And he ran a rebuilding offseason. I think he saw the analytics and said, we're not a 13-4 team trying to get to the Super Bowl. We're a rebuilding team. We're going to have a rebuilding offseason.
And we talked about in our news before we had you on, Aaron, that they're keeping their options open with Cousins, because I think they're using this as a big evaluation year, not we're going for this or we have the core in place already. Over in the NFC West, I get it. You, in terms of win projections, you have the Rams at 5.8. Arizona also at 5.8. And on the defensive side, you have the Rams 30th. And I think it's kind of hard to wrap your head around that a defense that has Aaron Donald ostensibly still in or near the peak of his game, anchoring a defense that could be this bad. But I would imagine for the exercise and the projections you do, they are a unique case because they just have so many new faces there and they're just kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, Aaron Donald, name another defender on the Rams. You guys can do it, of course, right? You guys know, hey, John Johnson just signed there, which isn't incorporated in this because that happened after we finished the book. And
no, it's a bad sign. I saw on their poster, Jordan Fuller was on their poster, who's like a 4th-year safety for fans out there, and that he's a defensive captain. Like, that's a pretty big, steep fall from Aaron Donald to Jordan Fuller.
Their secondary is almost all day 3 draft picks. And, other than Fuller, not established really players, there's like one linebacker, Ernest Jones. Like, there really isn't a second off-ball linebacker. Like, I don't know what they're going to do when they need to play nickel or base.
It's unusual to see the Ravens down as the 20th defense in the NFL.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, there's a little regression there. High turnovers last year. Their defense getting a lot younger this year than it was last year. The system doesn't really like that much. They were particularly good on third downs last year, so it sees that regressing a little bit. I mean, we like the Ravens overall. The thing that people forget about the Ravens is you can always pencil them in for, if not the best special teams in the league, close to the best special teams in the league. It's like this hidden little bump that they get when you're thinking about what they're going to do this year. Like, special teams are impossible to predict, except the Ravens, they're going to be good.
For a while, it was the Patriots, and
yeah, that's over. That's over after last year. God, they were terrible.
Fell off a cliff. I do think the Ravens defense is going to be better, but I'm basing it on subjective things, which is that I think their defense took a little bit to catch on last year under the new coordinator McDonald, and then I'm buying like little camp reports where it's like Michael Pierce is like a once in every 3-year player, but he sounds like he's looking pretty awesome this year. I think some of their young players like Matabuke, Owe, Ojabo, like a lot of guys who haven't quite produced at the NFL level, a full season of Roquan Smith and Queen together, which seemed like a great combination late last year. There's questions in the secondary, but they're a team to me that, and you said it, defense is hard to predict. That, like, if you told me they're a top 5 defense this year, I wouldn't be totally shocked. I feel like they have a chance at doing that and really surprising
I don't think I would be
teams.
totally shocked. You're right. The edge rushers, right? Like, part of it is they haven't had a really good edge rush for a couple of years, and they've depended on like rental veterans like Justin Houston. If those guys get it together, and you know that they have talent, Jabo and Odafe Owa, like, yeah, they could be a much better defense than we're projecting. Sure, absolutely.
Another team that you have falling off a cliff after an inspiring campaign a year ago in New York, the Giants, the G-Men.
Yeah, they were the mini Vikings, basically.
Were you about? You should might as well tee up Aaron. Do the talk about it. Talk about it.
No, I thought I emphasized that G-Men and then just like leave it to you. The
talk
stage
about the
is yours.
Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean they were a little overrated last year. I think Dable did an amazing job and ran a great offense. Their defense was meh, and they won games they were very close in, and their overall numbers weren't great. But the thing is, they're sort of hey, here's a team that's having kind of a lucky year, was so overshadowed by the Vikings having like
they were like the poor man's Vikings. You're right.
Years ever that, and then the two teams faced each other in the playoffs, which was, it was like battle of the network frauds, which the Giants won because they were better in our numbers over the course of the season. But
kind of messed up the NFC playoffs a little bit because we got the fraud game, and then you had the Eagles dismantling the fraud that won the next week. We don't need all those frauds.
Right. It's good that the Eagles played so well in the Super Bowl. I know they lost, but it was a classic.
If the story,
because before that, it was like no team has ever had such a bye to the Super Bowl.
If the story is that the Giants play better than this because Dable coaches the heck out of them, I will buy it. Like, I think Dable was a great coach last year, and it's hard, it's hard to control for that in a stat analysis system.
Right.
So
they coached up that defense. I'm with you. On paper, they coached up their defense to get it to even respectable last year. And in the back end, it's like Deonte Banks is getting smoked at practice, reportedly. Basically, linebacker and secondary is trouble. But they're looking at it like our lines are pretty good, and if you have good lines, that's a good base to build from, and we might.
Yeah,
have
you need a
chance,
good secondary too.
Right. I don't see it with them. I think they're a solid 4th for me.
Let's end it this way, Aaron, because this is in some ways the most vital question in your business and in all of sports. What do you have to say to the one thing you can't measure is heart, Mafia?
I mean, you measure heart because if a guy's heart makes him play better than his muscles would make him play, it's going to come out in his performance.
The heart is a muscle.
Heart will be in the numbers. The heart shows up in the numbers.
Chemistry. What you can't measure is whether guys get along in the locker room. You can't measure coaches, making their players play better through inspiration. That kind of stuff you can't measure. But I mean, I feel like, if a player wants it more, then you're going to see it in his numbers because he's going to do it more.
Asking for a friend. Last question. Last question. Is momentum real?
No.
Oh.
I mean, you knew that.
Well, we have a buddy, Patrick Claybon, who's I'm actually doing him a favor. I thought that it would align.
I felt we would go that way with.
I'm with.
I know how much players and coaches feel it. but you can't ever define it in such a way that's actually testable.
I mean, I'm
And
on
it
the
means
Claiborne
less in
Schatz side.
football anyway, because when the defense does something, the offense comes on, like completely different players come on the field after the offense does something or the defense does something. So it's not even like, in basketball where, you let up a 10-0 run and then you're still on the court. Like in football, completely different players are suddenly on the field.
Yeah. You just like to agree with Claiborne on everything, Greg. I don't believe you. I bet we could find 100 instances on this podcast where you talk about momentum swinging.
No, I think it's a little.
Eric, I have a project for you this weekend.
Oh, a big project.
I think it's a little more nuanced, but if you have to go just black and white, yes, no, then it's basically no, because it's a moving.
Here's the deal with Aaron Shatz. He's over with the FTN fantasy crowd, and his football almanac is as good as ever. Where can people get it? Get that plug in.
So the PDF version you can get at ftnfantasy.com. Look for the picture of Patrick Mahomes. He's on the cover of the book.
Smart.
There's a physical copy also. It's currently in review by Amazon, but within the next day or two, that should be available as well on Amazon. So physical book on Amazon, PDF at ftnfantasy.com.
Under review.
Yes.
Someone's got to read the whole thing in like one day. There's a lot going on here. So
Stents.
You have to make sure our fonts look right.
Right.
It's like Bezos is up in his office. He's like, actually, momentum is real. I'm going to need you to.
It's a big red stamp, like
Bezos
denied.
Is like, they're going over on the Commanders? That's so exciting.
There you go. Aaron Shatz, thank you for the time.
You got it.
Thanks, Aaron.
There you go. Listen, Greg, I just think you're saying this because I know that's the smart football guy.
I've always believed that. I just don't like getting in the same arguments over and over on this podcast. But back in the day, if you went back to like 2013, we were in those arguments.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not that
think you're
surprised.
lying.
I'm not that surprised
No.
that Greg takes the more robotic Earth approach to this topic, but I kind of disagree entirely.
I don't like the battle against science because science usually wins out.
You can't win verbally,
but there's something beaten in here. Okay.
Yeah, go talk to the real players who play.
And there's emotion.
Sure.
That drives
No one's
not
saying
just
that
sports,
that's not
but
important.
the human race and really all animals.
Do you ever feel
make them
momentum
great.
when you were a teenage tennis player, Greg?
Well, that's a one-on-one sport.
Well,
It's a little different.
what does
How about when you did well?
I think you're
with
removing a lot of the variables when it's a one-on-one sport.
But you're
well,
then
Mr. Scientist over here now.
it
The
exists or it
variables
doesn't
over here
exist.
now.
It exists
What about
or
the
it doesn't
girls in
exist.
high school when you got on that nice run you were on?
Yeah.
And you had the girlfriend after girlfriend, and then things slowed down a little bit, like
Hitting your
college,
stride.
post-college. That was momentum, my friend.
That's confidence.
It was born out of the momentum of one girl into
We're
the
talking
next.
about in a football game, first of all. Now
Greg,
you're-
just like
you're
leaving them behind. Oh, I'm bored of you. First period. That's my first period girl. I got my fourth period girl. I got my seventh period girl.
None of this is
Lunchtime.
true. None of-
Speaking of hearts, you didn't care about their hearts.
I cared a lot.
You're anti-heart.
That's why I think
Close the show.
it was working out, because it's like when people talk about high school and they're like, oh, yeah, there's this one girl I had a big like, didn't you have a crush on like 30 girls in high school all the time? Wasn't it always changing?
Well, there were
and
tiers.
then there was like
Yeah.
many at once because there's so many.
There was the crush that was like the
You
top
spread a wide
tier
net, yeah.
that
Right,
everyone
so you
loved.
get rejected. Like some of them, they feel your vibe and you're getting
but
smacked back. But
You could lock in on one, which is a mistake. That's what you
Right.
learned back in high school. You
I
lock in
learned
on
that-
one and you don't
learned that
see
the hard
anything
way.
else.
Right. There's the unattainable crush that you might have. Then there's the one that you think is attainable. Yeah, there are different levels of it.
Right.
I think I'm such a lover, not a robot,
Ooh.
that it was just the vibes were going out to many people, and then you're bound to
We should just
you're bound to have
change
some.
the subject 'cause I don't think we're going to agree on this one. I think you were cold and emotionless in high school, and you
This
just
is preposterous.
you just had notches on your bedpost rather than caring about people.
Well, it's tough to watch. Tough to see.
I was at the Taylor Swift show, which was an incredible scene, by the way. And even as a Taylor Swift fan, I am not near the level of the true Swifties. So I just kind of watched it from a distance, and it is a very cool vibe. I don't have any daughters. Greg, you do have a daughter. It was so cool to see.
I have a daughter.
You do.
No,
I mean,
TBA.
age 18, she kind of started over that relationship, and you guys are working through it. It was so great to see the vibe in SoFi Stadium of, this is an outdated term, the girl power, but it was just like this great communal experience of everyone like loving this woman who puts out all this positive energy and is such a great role model. I was as a dad, I was like, this would be a concert I would make sure to take my daughter to show the power of.
That's great.
Swift.
Did we ever find out who
What
won
if she didn't like
that
Taylor
raffle?
Swift that much, though?
Then I wouldn't take her. I guess I would take her to
Something else.
the Beyonce show.
I wanted to hear about your experience, so I'm glad you told that.
Who
It was great.
Who won this raffle, by the way? Did we ever get any?
We never got any info on that.
Did you see any
She
known
did
corpos
3.5
there?
hours, by the way.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Wow.
One more
Speaking
show
of
tonight.
Claybon-
Last one tonight.
Yeah. Speaking of Claybon, we were talking. He had came up with an idea to go sit up on the roof of our building and just see what you could hear, because you can hear
You can
Chargers
hear
and
it.
Rams games really well. So it's like
Well, we heard the
free
sound
show on the
check.
top of the parking.
We
garage.
left work on Thursday, and I could hear the sound check. I mean, the sound quality is not great from there, but it's something.
Yeah, it was great and an insane production. Like, I don't know how she does it. I have no idea how she's doing it night after night. All right. Anything else? Oh, I have one thing. Developing news. That's who I am. Boots on the ground. We mentioned the Rams. Jordan Rodriguez, who covers that team so well. She's been all over the story, helping figure out. We don't call T-shirt gate because we don't use gate around here. But what is who's responsible for that shirt? Let's flash that up again for the YouTube audience. Mentally and physically tough players who play smart and love to compete, but there's "and" spelled out, and then there's an ampersand.
Oh, disaster.
Here's what Jordan had to tell me, because we've been kind of back and forth all week on it. According to Jordan, both are Sean McVay quotes. "Model the way," which is the other shirt we saw, is a reminder to him and some of the vets to walk the walk this year and get back to teaching, where he's admitted he's gotten away from. He's admitted he got away from living his other slogans, "We not me," et cetera, last season. Now, the shirt in question, this was very interesting. According to Jordan, and this isn't hard reporting, like this is just based on conversations she has had, and I just want to make that very clear. It's presented more as a leading theory gathered from whispers around camp, okay? That the shirt and the way it's written, what is it, syntax?
Sure.
I mean, even just choosing to put all those words on the shirt, I'm counting them now. I think there's 12 words. It's a lot of words.
No
yes,
commas,
syntax.
13
mixed
words.
use of ampersands. That's the way Sean McVay texts on his phone. And the running theory, according to Jordan, and this is not hard reporting, but just formulated on conversations, is he texted whoever the assistant was to make the shirt, and of course said that assistant, would not dare to deviate from the word of the initial text from their boss. They just basically cut and pasted it onto the T-shirt design, and that's how you end up with this situation.
I love it. This is an A+ work by Jordan, not surprisingly. I think a more empowered assistant. But you're assuming the assistant is even caught by the "and" and the ampersand. Maybe that's not in their world. But if you were, you might want to go back to McVay and say, "I'm here to make you look good." Nerds out there who are,
Right.
grammatical nerds are going to look at the "and" and the ampersand and be thrown by it. Probably not all your players, some, but some of them are also nerds.
What if it was a test by McVay to see if said assistant would confront him or approach him?
Right.
And it's being used. I mean, if I'm that
Whether it's
assistant,
like a
I'm not sleeping well.
a yes man or woman. It's not about the assistant. It's about that terrible text, because you can fix the and there's no ampersand, and it's still a mouthful that you don't want on a T-shirt. It's a terrible T-shirt. So it's all on McVay. And I think if he wants to live, another slogan, like, how about take some responsibility, stand up at the podium and say, "That's on me. I didn't understand the game I was playing."
We're not far from Rams camp. Maybe we got to get up there and
Right.
ask the
I didn't
question.
understand the T-shirt game, and I made a mistake, because I think it's ultimately
Turn on the air conditioning. Get the car going, Eric. We got a road trip. Also, have you ever done an ampersand on text? You have to do like the shift down and find
I've done
right?
it multiple times.
I mean, that's something he sought out, the ampersand there.
Well, yeah, I think there's just the questions become deeper and they become more disturbing.
Sean McVay being an all caps texter is the least surprising news of the day. He's like Reinbold, our friend at Sky on Twitter, just like all caps, all.
I love that though. He gets the pass. All right, that's it. We'll be back Thursday with another show. Make sure you check that out. And anything else, Mark?
No, I think this was just an absolute delight and a joy. Thank you to Aaron Shatz. Thank you to Dan. Thank you to Greg. Thank you to Eric behind the glass. Thank you to everyone else behind the glass. Goodbye.
How about Parker and Randy?
Parker
Heed
and
the
Randy as well.
call.